I know we're a little bit early today, but it's one of those parking lot days where I try to get our little talk in whenever I can, and today is going to be a little early, so I hope you don't mind. Anyway, continuing with the theme set yesterday about our spirits real. I'm going to share with you something. I'm sure I've shared this with you before in the last 2 years sometime, but it deals sort of directly and fundamentally with the theme of what we were saying yesterday about the objectivity, subjectivity, the highness, the lowness, the supra dualistic frame of mind and level of consciousness that a magician has. And the opening chapter to my book, Low Magic, is called the Dogma and Rituals of Low Magic. And well, anyway, it should be self-explanatory, so I'm going to go ahead on. I was just noticing my alchemical hat here that my son bought for me a few years back when he visited the LA Museum of, I'm not sure which one, natural history maybe. They had an alchemical exhibit, but I'm looking at these symbols backwards as if they were a mirror image, and all three of them look just exactly alike in the mirror image as the alchemical symbols look exactly alike on both sides of the mirror. But I digress. Starts with an epigram from Crowley's Orpheus that Constance read from Orpheus the other day. And yes, we're going to try to get Constance. Somebody has suggested that Constance come on every full moon and do something, read some poetry or do something, talk about our nutritional magic that she does for us. So we're going to try to get her back. So if you want to hear more Constance, drop us a note here so I can put the pressure on her to appear more often on our morning shows. Anyway, were the world understood, ye would see it was good, a dance to a delicate measure. I confess that the title of this chapter was intended to be a gentle poke at the great 19th century esotericist Eliphas Levi and his classic work, Dogma and Rituals of High Magic. Please don't assume that my irreverent little presumption is in any way an attempt on my part to compare my own work with Levi's immortal text. Indeed, they are as different as day and night, or should I say high and low. See how easily I've given myself a segue? I feel the necessity to establish here at the outset what I mean by the words high magic and low magic. To be perfectly frank, I've become very uncomfortable with both terms. They are each, in my opinion, universally misunderstood, misused, misapplied, misrepresented, and misinterpreted. Some ceremonial magicians label their craft high magic to haughtily distinguish their art from the low magic of witchcraft. Conversely, some witches and neo-pagans use the term sarcastically to brand ceremonial magicians and their ilk as snobs. Practical Kabbalists, who presume their studies to be the only true high magic, use the terms to distinguish themselves from both ceremonial magic and witches. There are others who simply define low magic as being all things nature-based, outdoor magic, as opposed to ceremonial magic a la Formal Rites of the Golden Dawn or Aleister Crowley's indoor magic. Here the terms high and low are diplomatically construed by both schools as being morally neutral, the two merely differing in character and application and appealing to different spiritual personalities and tastes. Here, both the high and the low magician are relatively happy in their own worlds, performing their own brand of magic. There are many others, though, who define the highness and lowness of magic in ways that go beyond discussing the differences between working in a lodge room temple or outside in a grove. For these people, high magic refers to a formal process of effecting changes in one's environment by enlisting the aid of God and a heavenly hierarchy of good archangels, angels, intelligences, and spirits. And low magic refers to a formal process of effecting change by enlisting the aid of the devil or devils, fallen angels, or infernal evil spirits and demons. Obviously, in order to seriously consider the virtues of this perspective, a person must first be committed to a very particular, some say draconian, view of spiritual reality. One that is supported, or so the argument goes, by the scriptures and doctrines of the Christian, Muslim, or Jewish religions. For convenience sake, I will henceforth collectively and respectfully refer to these Bible-based religions by a term I've coined just for conversations such as this. The word is Chrislmu. One popular interpretation of these doctrines posits that humans are caught in the middle of a perpetual war between the armies of an absolute good God in heaven above and the minions of an absolute evil devil in hell below. For reasons known only to God, the devil and his team have been placed in charge of human life on earth. Furthermore, according to this theory, God has especially charged the devil with the duty of tempting and tormenting human beings, perpetually prodding us to rebel against a curiously complex catalog of commandments and divinely decreed roster of rules, irrational beliefs, and blindly obedient behavior that, if we follow the program faithfully, might earn for us, after death, a ticket to eternal happiness in heaven with God and his good angels. That, when I said might earn for us, there's a footnote concerning the curious doctrine of grace, that either we're born with it or we're not, and no matter how good we are, if we don't have it, SOL. This parochial and highly polarized way of looking at things makes everything pretty simple. God is good. The devil is bad. Angels are good. Demons are bad. Heavenly stuff is high. Infernal stuff is low. For those who subscribe to the Chrislmu worldview, the choice of whether to pursue the path of high or low magic is a no-brainer. After all, who in their right mind would prefer to dabble with dangerous and deceitful evil demons from hell, when instead one can safely seek the heavenly aid of the wholesome and well-behaved good angels of God Almighty? From his high horse of spiritual piety, the high magician looks down upon the low magician, who, in order to accomplish their nefarious ends, stand ready to proffer their reprobate souls to the evil spirits in exchange for the fleeting power to be naughty, to harm an enemy, bewitch a neighbor's cow, or bed an otherwise unwilling partner. There are many people in the world today, magicians and non-magicians alike, who believe quite literally that the above arrangement is the only spiritual game plan in town. It is certainly their right to do so. After all, for many of us, this God, devil, heaven, hell, angel, demon morality play is a familiar foundation upon which the perversely comfortable faith of our fathers was built. Well, I certainly do not wish to offend anyone's sincere spiritual beliefs, and I hold up my hand and swear some of my best friends are Grizzlemews. I must, however, be honest. I do not believe in such an all-good anthropomorphic God. Neither do I believe in an all-evil anthropomorphic devil. I don't believe in a heaven where I'll be rewarded for believing correctly, or a hell where I'll be punished for my unbelief. In fact, I believe there's something terribly wrong and spiritually toxic with this entire picture. Dangerously and tragically wrong. A wrongness that has plagued the Western psyche for millennia. A primitive and superstitious phantasm of the mind. A nightmare that has infected the human soul with a virus of fear and self-loathing. A cancerous curse that demands that every man, woman, and child surrender to the great lie that would make us believe that our very humanness makes us unclean and damned in the eyes of a wrathful deity. Does my rejection of a too literal interpretation of the scriptural worldview of the Grizzlemews make me an atheist? For those who adhere too tightly to their doctrines, I guess it does. But it certainly does not from my point of view. I most ardently believe in, indeed I worship, a supreme consciousness that is the ultimate source of all manifest and unmanifest existence. I believe that you and I and every other monad of existence are components of the supreme consciousness. My morality, if you insist on calling that, is based on my conviction that the ultimate nature of this super existence is transcendently good. A good we can never adequately define with our words or understand with our meat brains. A good so all-comprehensively infinite that there can be nothing outside of itself. Not even nothing. There can be no opposite to this great good. The goodness of supreme existence is spelled with the largest capital G imaginable. I call it the Great G. There I go again, making up words. Well, get used to it, because I'm going to use a lot. I'm going to use this one a lot, okay? The Great G swallows up the concept of duality. It neutralizes all concepts that remain so small that it's possible for them to have opposites. Ideas such as a God who's so small and incomplete that there is an outside of himself where a pesky devil can go running around causing trouble. Ideas such as darkness and light, good little goods and evil little evils, little highs and little lows. Perhaps the brains of our ancestors were not developed enough to grasp the idea of the great goodness of the supreme existence. After all, in the ages when the Chrysalmu and proto-Chrysalmu doctrines were invented, our minds were yet unexpanded and unburdened with thoughts of gravity or the speed of light or the rotation of the earth or its orbit of the sun or black holes or the nature of space-time. Perhaps back then it was impossible for us to wrap our brains around the reality that didn't spring solely from primitive fear-based motivations of reward and punishment, pain and pleasure. Perhaps then, but not now. After nearly 40 years, that's when this was written, nearly 40 years of magical study and practice, I've come to the conclusion that magic is magic. It's a spiritual art form by which we collect and direct a natural and neutral force whose source is the supreme intelligence, the supreme consciousness. In the right hands, under the right circumstances, the application of magic can be creative or destructive, helpful or harmful. It's not the magic that's good or evil or high or low, it's the magician. No matter how pious and virtuous one may believe oneself to be, no matter how seemingly altruistic one's motives, no matter how precise and eloquently one executes the invocations to enlist the favor of God and the services of his angels, a magician who has not yet grasped this big picture and achieved a significant measure of spiritual maturity, mental stability, and purity of heart, is not yet equipped to recognize relative good from relative evil. Like a marksman firing a powerful weapon in the dark, the naive or superstitious magician is incapable of accurately hitting the mark or determining what magical actions will or will not be in his or her best interests. Conversely, if the magician is in touch with the great G, there is no devil too evil, no angel too fallen, no demon too foul to be redeemed into the service of the great work. And so, at the very beginning of my little book, I hereby confess that my title is a facetious and mischievous blind. It is with my tongue planted firmly in my cheek that I use the term low magic to describe the magical operations that follow. However, please don't think that by using the term I'm being silly for silliness' sake. Many years ago, as a naive and desperate young magician, I evoked Ouroboros, a demon from the Goetia, for the purpose of turning around my impoverished and chaotic life circumstances, to save my family, to provide materially for my wife and child, and to give me the emotional stability to practice the great work. In my naive and inexperienced mind, it was an act of black magic, an encounter with the devil himself, that I was prepared to perform against my teacher's wishes. In fact, when I told her I'd become so desperate that I intended to go through with it, she flatly forbade it. When I asked if she had ever performed such an operation, she said, "Certainly not. That's low magic." In an act of magical disobedience, I did it anyway. I knew I had to. I had to succeed because the consequences of failure at that point in my life were unthinkable. I was fearful and clumsy. The operation almost immediately turned into a terrifying and traumatic comedy of errors that more resembled an industrial accident and a nervous breakdown than a magical ceremony. The climax of the ceremony was a life and death confrontation and struggle with the real demon responsible for my miserable condition. Me. The whole crazy business seemed to pull out of my guts the very worst in me, my worst fears, the worst aspect of my character, my worst insecurities and feelings of shame and guilt. I didn't know it at the time, but that's exactly what was supposed to be happening. That's what Solomonic magic is all about. The worst in me was my problem. The worst in me was my demon. When it finally dawned on me that I had successfully evoked the demon and had the worst of me trapped in that magic triangle, I had no alternative but to harness and redirect its monstrous power and give it new marching orders. From then on, that particular demon would be working for me rather than against me. I'll spare you the details, but suffice to say, within minutes of concluding my bumbling act of low magic, a dramatic event occurred that set into motion a chain of events. With breathtaking speed, accomplished everything I asked Orobas to deliver. But the real miracle was not the magical quid pro quo of a demon bent to obedience by the will of a magician, but the miracle of a magician who had redeemed a better demon of his nature. When the fiasco was over, I was a different person. A person who would save his family, provide materially for his wife and child, and in the days and months and years ahead, clutch on to just enough emotional stability to pursue the great work. In the first sentence of this chapter, I referred to Eliphas Levi as a great 19th century esotericist. I did not call him a magician. Even though Monsieur Levi is universally lauded as the father of modern high magic, he was not a practicing magician. He was a brilliant scholar, a holy man, a teacher, a magical philosopher. But with the exception of one curious necromantic experiment that he confessed was not at all successful, he did not practice magic. I do practice magic. In fact, I now view my entire life, waking and sleeping, to be a continuous magical operation. And so, gentle reader, for the duration of this book, the stories I shall tell of magical operations that I've actually done rather than just read about, or performed rather than just discussed, experienced rather than just fantasized, and executed rather than merely mused upon, I will affectionately and unapologetically call acts of low magic. And that's it for today. I know I started early and everything else. I hope you get a chance sometime today to see this, and that you'll be with me tomorrow. And that maybe you can help me convince St. Constance into appearing at least vocally more often on our morning get-togethers. Until then, tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.